I want to talk to you about something I've been thinking a lot about, and that relates to Donald Trump filling his cabinet with former members of the military. There's at least 4 retired generals that may be in the mix for prominent roles in Donald Trump's administration. We have retired Marine General Jim Mattis, who has been selected already for defense secretary. That is notable because there's this longstanding tradition where you don't name a retired military leader to serve as defense secretary, period. And in particular, Mattis is going to require Congress to grant a waiver that it previously gave to World War II veteran George Marshall, who held the position of Secretary of Defense under President Harry Truman. Active or former military members must be out of active duty for 7 years before serving as Secretary of Defense. Mattis has only been out for 3, so that will require a special waiver from Congress. That's number one. We also know about retired Army Lieutenant General Michael Flynn in the position of Donald Trump's national security advisor. Cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, guy's out of his mind. We've talked about that already. We know that Donald Trump is considering retired General John Kelly as Homeland Security Secretary. We know that Donald Trump met a few days ago with retired Rear Admiral Jay Cohen, a former senior Homeland Security official. And additionally, we spoke about this a little bit yesterday. Retired 4-star Army General David Petraeus is in the mix as a possible Secretary of State. So there's concern about the military heavy weight of Trump's cabinet and advisors from lawmakers, from diplomats, from former national security officials. And the general concern is sort of obvious. Too many former military in the president's cabinet and in his ear makes the president overly influenced by a military perspective. People who are more likely to see, based on their careers in the military as the solution to problems rather than diplomacy. And if you have a president with lots of foreign policy and national security experience from the civilian world, then you don't worry that much because you have that as a counterbalance to the military perspective that you will get from your cabinet or advisors. But remember, Pat, that Trump has no experience at all. So you have someone with no experience in foreign policy, diplomacy, national security, and the voices that he will be having in his ear, so to speak, will be disproportionately military voices for his presidency. That is a real concern.
Yeah, and the United States has even warned other countries against putting too many military leaders in positions of power.
Absolutely.
Because they're going to be overly aggressive. And the other concern, too, is that some of these military leaders may have expertise in the Middle East, but not so much diplomatic relationships in Europe, Asia, Africa, etc.
Increasingly important areas where
Yes.
we are, especially when you've got a president that is basically declaring trade war on China and some of our other primary trading partners. And let me remind you that Trump and his base claim to be about the Constitution. And an important constitutional premise is civilian control of the government, not military control. And I know that some Trumpists will hear this and they'll say, David, when you're former military, you are a civilian. But that is a technicality. What I'm talking about is the big picture, that those who are career military are going to have a very different view, as Pat says, on foreign and national security policy than those who come from the civilian world in terms of their careers. And I want to put up a quote for you from Gordon Adams, who's a former White House official and professor at American University, who said, "It isn't about personalities. The problem here is structural. A president who doesn't know much about foreign policy and a vice president who doesn't know much about foreign policy are surrounding themselves with people who served in uniform. It runs counter to the American tradition of civilian control. Do you want a big portion of your national security and defense and foreign policy advisors coming from the less than 1% that has served in the military? That is an incredibly narrow scope of experience. And this is totally separate from the specifics of these particular former military people. I've already told you about the crazy ideas of Michael Flynn. Are there any silver linings? The theme of the next 4 years. Can we find a silver lining here? Well, one silver lining is that Trump expressed, quote, surprise that Mattis, who is a generally tough-talking guy, actually talked him against the use of torture. And Trump, as Trump told the New York Times, I said, what do you think of waterboarding? Mattis said, I've never found it useful. I've always found, give me a pack of cigarettes and a couple of beers, and I do better with that than I do with torture. Is that a possible silver lining, that Mattis seems to at least recognize the pragmatic reality that torture isn't effective?
Well, I mean, Trump is easily convinced, it seems, and
Yeah.
will just go along with the last person in the room. So in that case, yes, it is.
If Trump doesn't hire them, how will he teach them? Remember, Trump said during the election that he knows more than the generals. So maybe this is all a ploy just to hire all of these generals and then teach them. Really important to keep a close eye on Donald Trump's relationship to the military. We don't want to go in the direction of many of the countries that make it a habit to regularly have current and former military running the entire country. That is the seed of autocracy and a lot of other asses that many in our audience are probably increasingly fearful of. I've talked about how people of all ages, but particularly millennials, are owning cars less and participating more in the sharing economy. And one of the more popular options is Zipcar, which gets you a car when you want it, when you need it. They offer all sorts of cars, SUVs, hybrids, whatever you need. It includes insurance and it includes gas. You just pay for the time that you actually use the car. And you can reserve the car online from your smartphone over the phone. Then you unlock it with your Zip card. Each car share member reduces their personal CO2 emissions by between 1,100 and 1,600 pounds per year. For our audience, Zipcar is offering $25 of free driving credit if you sign up at joinzipcar.com/David. Support our show, reduce your carbon emissions and your spending on cars. Sign up at joinzipcar.com/David.